You're essentially leveraging what you already have and making it more cost effective and repeatable.
A lot of people are basically getting AI to write novels and, try to put them forward as if they were original pieces. I see my main role as being new clients in business development.
This is someone that people follow, people interact with, people believe is a real person.
Nothing's ever personal. When things go right or wrong, it's not personal to you. It's just the way it happens.
Welcome to the podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a growth company that helps professional services firms from around the world help increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Stephen Routledge, co-founder and managing director of Trillium Partners, an independent investment banking boutique that's been serving the content industries for over 20 years. Stephen brings over 30 years of corporate finance experience, having previously built and led the media group at HSBC Investment Bank. What makes Stephen's perspective particularly timely is his deep focus on what he calls content-driven industries, spanning everything from traditional media to business information services and events. As someone who's witnessed major technological disruptions before, from the early 2000s internet revolution to today's AI transformation, Stephen offers unique insights into how these changes are reshaping M&A activity and creating new opportunities in a sector that, while representing just 2% of the global market cap, punches well above its weight in terms of entrepreneurial activity and innovation. Stephen, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Saeed, and thank you for inviting me on to talk to you today. Well, you've kindly summed up the background to it, which, just to rehearse briefly, is that Trillium Partners was set up by me and my partner, Philip Mastroforti, just over 20 years ago. And we focus on mid-market mergers and acquisitions work and private capital raising. And our focus, which we'll talk about today, is on the content-driven industries. Now, that's an interesting place to start because when we started this business 20 years ago, when I entered investment banking over 30 years ago, media was the way it was all described, which of course derived from the plural of medium. So we're talking newspapers, radio stations, television stations. It was a very segmented industry. And what's one of the things that's been particularly driven, certainly by the internet and other innovations over these last few decades, is the emergence of what is really the content industry, the content-driven industries. And so an example I'm fond of is my iPhone. I don't know how it works. I've no idea about the software, and I've no idea how it connects to the tower, wherever that might be. But I do know that it's useless without content. So in the TMT, the traditional TMT abbreviation for tech, media, and telecoms, it's really, in my view and in our view, the middle part, the content that really matters and where the value lies. I'm aware that there's a lot of innovation going on in the world of technology and in telecoms. But content is our home, and we have seen it change a lot. And as you mentioned at the start, just to sort of finish off perhaps the intro thinking, we have seen some big shifts and major disruptions in the industry over the period I've been involved with it. I'm amazed myself to think that when I started in the industry 30 years ago, and I can remember standing in a press hall at Wapping, where they were printing us some newspaper, and they were printing millions of copies a day on presses that were 3 and 4 stories high. And all of that has gone. They still print some newspapers, but you're going out. Because we've had, I would say, 2 major upheavals, and we might want to dig into those a little bit. There was the internet, of course, but more than just the internet as the thing is the advent of broadband, so far as content is concerned. Obviously, in the 90s, we had the internet. Well, we had it before that, but it began to become prominent in the 90s. And during that time, the potential was there, but to make content much, much more accessible and flexible, but the technology didn't exist. We were in a pre-broadband world. One of the problems that led to the tech crash was that valuations were being built in the late 90s and 2000s on the back of what was still a not yet achieved or apparent transition to broadband. In effect, the tech crash, or the tech boom, whichever way you care to look at it, was 2 or 3 years behind the times, or 2 or 3 years too soon. Really, it was the early noughties, the 2002s and 3s and 4s, when we had what you might call proper penetration of broadband and availability to consumers and businesses at effective rates and reliability. Well, once that took root, then we saw a massive change in the content industries. I'll give you just a very simple example. One of our clients, it was called Metal Bulletin, and its business had been sending out each Friday a paper slip or newsletter with that week's pricing for metals. So if you want to know what the price of zinc was in certain markets around the world, you found out each Friday from a piece of paper that was posted to you from Metal Bulletin's offices. Then the next stage was, it went to PDF, of course, but the next stage was broadband. A broadband allowed it to be sent on Friday at 4:00 in PDF form to every recipient around the globe instantaneously, electronically. There was no arbitraging, there was no delay, and that was what I would say is a very specific and clear example of the value, not just, as it were, created by broadband, but specifically the value accrued to, let's say in this case, the owner of the metals pricing data. Because suddenly you had something which was actionable and on people's desks before the end of the week via the broadband. So that worked its way through, and I used a business content example there, but plainly the winner out of the broadband revolution was the consumer. Suddenly the consumer went from having to pay what today we would consider to be, silly prices for individual media products like magazines or newspapers to the expectation which holds to this day, although it has been moving lately with more of a move to subscription. But a basic premise that consumers get a lot for free. So I would say that both businesses and consumers were big winners out of broadband. But that's all fine. The thing which occupies the minds of just about everybody in the business world and in the world in general is the next and possibly even more groundbreaking effect of AI, of course. And that is something which stands to affect the creative industries just every bit as much as any other industry you could name. And I'll try to be brief about that. AI is coming at the creative industries from two directions, the content industry. It's, on the one hand, it's a helper, of course. It's efficiency. It brings both consumers and businesses new tools, access to new content, and all of that. So that's the one hand, it's the helper. The other hand, it's the threat. And there's a sharp differentiation between business media and consumer media. In consumer media, the threat exists. And by which I mean that we've probably all by now read at least, half a dozen stories about how, everything from radio, Spotify or TV shows, cartoons, you name it, can now be made almost perfectly on AI. There's still some way to go. People don't have six fingers anymore in AI-generated movies, but there are out there now fully functional half-hour dramas written by AI and, as it were, filmed by AI. They're still far from convincing, but they're not that far off. So consumer media companies have got to work out a way to take this on. And then there's the business side of it. Now they benefit not just from the efficiency, but also because most business media companies who've done any thinking and preparing for the world over the last 10 years have moved behind paywalls, have set up subscription-based businesses. And your AI engines can't get behind those. So the data that groups like RELX sit on and the other major business media companies, where they're charging, subscriptions of $50,000 a year, are insulated from AI as they are paywall. So they're going to be big beneficiaries. And I think there's already, just to put it to simple market terms, in terms of multiples on the market, if you like, there's already a huge difference between consumer content businesses, which might be around the 5 or 6 or 7 times EBITDA level versus the business media, and particularly the business media, which are the subscription-driven, high-value variety like a RELX, where you're well into the teens. And the last thing I'll mention is that a particular corner of business media which stands to benefit from AI is the events world. There are now business events companies that are worth billions. Those companies, again, are at a great place to produce a product, namely the face-to-face event between living people that AI can't come near. So if you like, you could always make a case that the events industry is the most robustly placed. It has all the advantages of being able to use the AI as a data tool and an efficiency driver and all of those good things, because there's a lot of work that goes into making a good event, but you still have to go to the event. So that's a quick overview of the last 20 or 30 years in the content world for you. And the last thing I'll say is that, of course, we in the world of M&A and capital raising thrive on change and disruption because it drives volume of business. Every time there is a big strategic move or a big strategic threat, businesses will make alignments and they'll raise money and they'll do other things that we do in order to face that. So we say bring it on. But that's probably what you'd expect me to say.
Absolutely.
I hope they get started.
No, 100%. There's a lot to unpack there, and I absolutely love it. It's so interesting, some of the things you mentioned there. But I want to touch on a single point that you mentioned that I think kind of take precedent in the current in the current world climate, in the sense that there's a word that you use there, data, right? And data being, and you mentioned there, the companies and the brands that have stored their data behind a paywall are protected essentially from AI. And what that essentially does is gives them the competitive advantage to be able to leverage not being in the public domain as much as what AI has allowed most things to be. What kind of trends are you seeing with regards to these types of companies and the competitive advantage that comes into it and the disruption that follows?
Well, that's a very good question. Of course, a lot of things drive activity in M&A and capital raising in those big businesses like any other, which have got nothing whatsoever to do with major fundamental industry change. The simple and regularly seen motives of simple scaling and acquiring new product lines, new sector success, new coverage, new geographic coverage. All of those traditional drivers of M&A are all still there. And at the present time, if I'm sitting thinking about a major business media organization, I would say to you that there's probably not very much they can do in terms of M&A about AI. I mean, I'm not intending that to sound negative. In fact, it's sort of a positive. I mean, if you're sitting there, if you are in the business of creating and selling data, which is something that the users of it must have, then you're carrying on doing that, and you'll carry on making acquisitions of new groups into your own group that offer new data and new customers, and just like you ever did. The likelihood that, to use my example, Relics would now go out and make an acquisition in the AI space seems to me to be remote. There's nothing, obviously there's a sort of very small sidebar which says that the AI industry, like every other, does have its information requirements. I mean, the actual ChatGPTs of this world do need to have their own little subset of M&A requirements of buying competitors and tools and making strategic moves. But I'm not really talking about that. I think that right now, if you're sitting running a major business information, a business content business company, you're doing what you've always done, which is invest in your content, invest in the quality and the appeal to the client. There's nothing you can really buy that, as I've said, unless you intend to get out and cover the AI industry and make AI companies your clients, that is going to occupy your mind so much. So the other question is there anything you might want to go and buy or at least take some action with in regard to amongst the tools end of it, amongst the efficiency part of it? And there, at the moment, and certainly given multiples, I don't think a 15x or even a 20x business information company is actually going to go out and buy an AI tool. They're going to invest in AI. I can see a case for raising capital to invest in AI capability, because that's not going to be cheap. It's going to be expensive. So I can see the focus is going to be on getting yourself in the best AI position you could be as regards the tools and the other things that will drive your efficiency. That will not at present be through buying businesses making those tools, because as I've said, I think they wouldn't be able to afford them. Multiples would be crazy, and shareholders would say, what are you doing? But if the gig was, we want to raise 20 million or 200 million or something else to turn ourselves into the market leader in terms of use of AI to generate our content, which we then go and sell, data, yeah, I could see that. That's where I could see that happening. It's in consumer media where I think the activity is going to happen. And what I would say to you there is that the classic response to major, because as I said earlier in the conversation, it's in the consumer media. And I'm talking about everything from television to radio to music services, anything at all that entertains the consumer. When an industry is faced with this challenge, AI, as I was describing it, actually to their content, which business doesn't have, that's when you see a drive toward consolidation, scale. Traditionally, it's the classic response to an industry disruption is to grow scale and to make yourself stronger and stronger and build capital to try and take it on. And there I could see an activity also, not just in terms of mergers for scale and defense, but also there I could see large media groups. I shouldn't be saying media, I'm doing against my own thesis. Large content groups buying, smaller businesses that are having success with AI product. I mentioned a few minutes ago, the sort of products that are beginning to creep in out there, these sort of businesses that can make dramas that last half an hour in AI. Now, I could see a Fox or an equivalent buying those companies, just saying, I want that tech, I want it now, and I don't care if I pay for it. I'm going to do that because otherwise they're going to start making programs that I can't even compete with. That's where I think we'll see the M&A. Still see capital raising because there'll still need tools as well. So in fact, out of that little tour around the universe, the only space where I can't see much direct M&A activity is in the business content space.
Makes sense in the sense that the B2B space versus the B2C space, they're two different spheres, right? And it actually, what you mentioned there actually, and I'm no expert in the matter, but it reminds me of, I don't know if you remember the Hollywood strikes that took place.
Yes.
Yeah, and they were very keen on saying, oh, we don't want our faces to be used by AI and contracts and that type of stuff. And I wanted to pick your brains on that because that to me sounds like that's the way the consumer space seems to be trending towards in those types of, and especially these large media groups, whether that be Hollywood, whether that be news networks, whether that be other groups. It makes a lot of sense, though, going down that direction because you're leveraging what you already have as an asset, and then you're essentially leveraging what you already have and making it more cost effective and repeatable, especially with the other tools out there. There's, I think, more and more AI tools coming out, VEO3, which essentially gives you really lifelike AI content that you can just prompt your way into creating a show, like you said. And so to me, it's like, what are you seeing that's happening in that B2C or the consumer space that's really, I guess, topical?
Here's my thesis about it, about what's going to happen with this whole issue of the big budget, mega end of consumer media, like you just said. So at the moment, people will go to or be subscribers to, or whatever it is, a media and content product because they like Tom Cruise, or there's a certain number of star power people and they're relevant to you and me, and we know them, we've been to their movies and the Marvel franchise and all the people in that and so on. So at the moment, the script writers are concerned because they don't have that. They are right in the sharp edge of this. And I'm afraid for them, my regretful conclusion is that their days are numbered compared to what they are today. We could have an aside here because there's another issue in the publishing space, the trade publishing space, as in, novels and whatnot. Because a decent AI, if you sit down and ask an AI to write you a thriller noir in the, Hollywood era, in the manner of a 50s crime writer, you'll get exactly that. And I know that it's a big issue right now because a lot of people are basically getting AI to write novels and, try to put them forward as if they were original pieces. So the script writers have got quite a lot to think about. And that, I'm afraid, the script writers' actions have a lot of echoes in history, whether it's the Luddites or whomever. Whenever there's been new moves in technology down the centuries, those who've stood to lose have often come forward and engaged in civil disturbance. Well, not that the script writers were, but has happened in the past. But when it comes to the top line, at the moment, we have a situation where AI can sort of do what it likes, but I still want to go and see Tom Cruise in the movies. Now, that brings back to this thesis I mentioned. You see, right now we have this draw of big names driving big box office receipts in Hollywood and Netflix and so forth. Well, those people are going to die. And my own view on it is that we're all familiar with that statistic that Elvis Presley has made more money since he died than when he was alive. And that's got nothing to do with AI. But there'll be a period of time where the estates of great movie actors, I'll use movie, it could be rock singers, when Paul McCartney dies or whatever, or the Rolling Stones have gone, a bit like the ABBA show that we're all familiar with, okay? There's going to be a period of time where their estates, in a way that has never been possible, really, will be able to continue to cash in on those people. I mean, if in 20 years' time you're making a movie and you want Tom Cruise as he looked when he was 25, AI will be able to make that film for you, and the Tom Cruise estate will get a lot of money. That's phase 2. Right now we're in phase 1. Phase 3, however, comes when no one who remembers Tom Cruise is even alive. And when that happens, that's when I think the challenge is going to be, or the opportunity, will be actually the creation of AI stars, AI formulations, AI Tom Cruise versions. So I think we'll see a period where today's top box office draws will continue to draw in the money, even if they've gone or they're old. And then, as I said, that the last generation who were fans will be gone too. And I think it'll be the executives in Hollywood and the streamers, whoever, who will say, do we now try to promote the next Tom Cruise, a real person, or do we actually create an AI character for adventure movies, and we'll make that character the center of a series of movies, or whatever it is, to an audience which is accepting of it?
So fascinating you've said that. This is a topic that I could talk about all day, just because I'm a massive film fan, right? I absolutely love watching films. I have done my whole life. But it's such an interesting point you mentioned there with the regards of the 3-phase approach, right? We've got the movie stars, and we're already seeing the dying out of the true movie stars, right? Like, you've got the Tom Cruises. Will Smith was probably one of them once upon a time. He's dying out. And then you've got Denzel still there. But like the true movie stars, the blockbuster, it's a dying breed right now. And I think people miss the days of really quality action heroes or like main stars or whatever. But that's the world we're coming in. We're coming in the age of Netflix, Amazon Prime, where content is being fed to us. Netflix-driven content is very much, it's commonly explained that most people don't like what is there. It's nothing spectacular, but then you get the odd, oh, that was really great, or that was really great. But it's more of a volume playing versus what it was previously. And the phase 2, what you mentioned there, with the fact that, okay, yeah, so those who can remember those movie stars might still be able to get to see them in their prime thanks to AI. But phase 3, I feel like we're seeing little rumblings of things happening now. Like, you see, there's Instagram stars at the moment that are like have thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers, right? And it's just an AI account. It's like, it could be a woman that is pure AI. Every single picture is AI. And this is someone that people follow, people interact with, people believe is a real person. And there's no reason why Hollywood or other media companies don't go down this direction, especially if it's to an audience that is far more accepting to it than the audience that grew up and kind of are, I guess, resistant to it at the moment. Really,
I'd throw in one observation, actually, which is, I don't know if you're old enough to remember Lara Croft, but she loved
Lara Croft.
Okay.
Yeah.
She was what I would call the prototype AI celebrity. In other words, she didn't exist. She was made up. She captured the hearts of many gamers. There was even a Land Rover special Lara Croft edition you could buy.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, there was. Yeah, they're quite valuable to collectors now.
Wow.
So I'm not saying that you're doubting at all. I'm just saying that anyone who does doubt this sort of thing only has to look at a Lara Croft or as you say, what's going on today with people following non-existent creations. And because of the power of AI, unlike talent in years gone by, when if you were lucky, you might write a letter to the fan club and get a response to some kind and sell a signature for thousands. Now, AI can deal with as many fans as want to have a relationship for nothing. So you can build your way to, building up the character, the promotional expense. If you can get the character right, will be peanuts.
Absolutely. So fascinating. In this segment of the podcast, we like to call the Entrepreneur's Room. And that's a series of questions we like to ask all of our guests to give our viewers and listeners an opportunity to understand how business owners and business leaders think and operate when running their business. So in this section of the podcast, I always like to ask the same question, which is, how are you currently spending your days as a leader of the business?
Probably in the same way that I've devoted most of my time for the last 20 years, which is that I see my main role as being new client and business development. The world of M&A and capital raising generally and financial institutions, notwithstanding all we've been talking about in terms of technology, is foremost a relationships industry. And particularly if we're talking about the world of mergers and acquisitions, because if your client is going to go through a deal which can make or break their reputation, which is something they're not used to doing, it's like corporate open heart surgery. If it's a big transaction, they're only going to do that with someone who they feel they know and trust. So M&A and fundraising is a long game, and it's important to build relationships and to have a two-way dialogue and trust with your clients. So my biggest job has always been to do that, and it will keep occupying my thinking, all my working hours and days. Now, obviously, beyond that, there's clearly importance to having and building younger members of the team and mentoring. We've had a new droider begin today, and the first actually, and a very promising young man, and very much alive in my thinking and that of my co-founder is making sure that we develop our talent. The phrase war on talent has just been worn to death, but it's absolutely true. And we're a small investment banking business, so we need to show our younger colleagues that it's a good place to be, where you can talk direct to the founder and pick up the phone or get on the screen. And so I guess the second thing I would highlight is the role of not just the mentoring and the growing of the talent and developing people, but also showing them that they will learn faster and more deeply when they're in a smaller organization, because we are forever fending off approaches to our younger colleagues from much, much larger groups who kind of value their sort of intellectual depth and flexibility that you get if you work in a boutique institution for a few years. And I think the third and final thing, which is probably what's taken up most of the conversation so far, is, of course, anticipation of and thinking about future business trends. In fact, that sits neatly with the other two, because I think if I'm to have a good relationship with a client, I need to be taking them thoughts that they haven't really thought about. And that's not easy when you're talking about chair people and CEOs and CFOs. It's not an easy thing to be able to get them to think, but they're smart people. It's also important to, make sure that the younger colleagues feel that they're working with people who are trying to be as close to the age as they can be. So that's my third. Those are my three tasks.
Love it. It's one eye on the present, but the other eye on the future at all times.
Yes.
It sounds
Yes.
which is always interesting. What are the most important metrics for you when running the business?
I think we are no different from any other small or indeed any size of business. And that is to say that the most important metric has always got to be cash and cash flow. We haven't continued for 20 plus years without having a strong understanding of an approach to cash flow. And I certainly make it my business. We obviously have accountants, but I make it my business to be on top of that on a pretty regular basis. M&A is an industry where fees and receipts come in lumps rather than in so much in retainers and work fees. So you have to take quite a small c conservative approach to cash management. We'll go on from the cash bit. So having stressed that, which would be the same, I think, in most smaller businesses, for us, clearly the important stage comes down to client interaction, network interaction, actual volume of meetings, discussions, debates. As we spend each week, we review sort of quantity and quality of the preceding week's interactions, and we then look forward for the next several weeks as to what's coming up and how we could best leverage those interactions through research and otherwise around the situation in question. So I would say for a client-driven business that it's cash flow sourced out, then the main metric is going to remain clients. We could go on about other things, but ours is a fairly simple business.
Yeah, no, 100%. I guess it's always important. It's that famous saying, cash is oxygen in any business, right? You need cash to be able to And if in M&A, the seats are more of in like lump sums rather than retainer, then you 100% need to be more conservative with your approach. And on top of that, if you're focusing on cash, then you also always got to focus on the clients that also are the opportunities for building relationships and things like that. So I think it's really interesting you mentioned there. In terms of, you touched on it earlier with regards to looking at always bringing in doing BD. How are you currently growing the business? What business development activities are you currently doing to grow the business?
Well, our business development approach is fairly traditional in the sense that you've got a group of individuals who have many decades of experience. I think across the senior team, we've got over a century of experience dealing with clients and transactions. And because we are, as I said earlier in the conversation, we're dealing with things that are quite often big moments for our clients. So this isn't, we don't do, if you like, scattergun, broad spectrum marketing or PR. Someone told me when I was a very young banker that the best marketing is doing a deal with a client. And if you can win that client again, then it's a lot easier than winning a new client. So, I mean, we do a lot of interactions with clients. We have like a lot of catch-up Zoom call, or lunch, or dinner. But it's very narrow band. It's very specific. And normally you would want to be having that interaction because you had something to say, some idea, or something to throw at the wall and see if it sticks. So our business development is bespoke, narrow cast, focused on a lot of it on existing clients. And I think the measure for that has been down the years for us, the number of repeat deals we've done for clients. And I think our biggest repeat numbers, we've done like 5 or 6 deals for some of our clients, and which for many clients is 5 or 6 deals, well, not clients necessarily, but many corporates can be 5 or 6 more deals than they ever do. So we're focused on that. We're tending the garden.
Yeah, I think it's 100% makes a lot of sense. And I think there's a statistic out there that says that someone who has purchased from you before is 10 times more likely to purchase from you again, so long as they've had the outcome that they're looking for or the result, a positive result that they've gained. So those are 100%. It's always important to nurture, and as you said there, tend the garden that you already have before going out. Yeah, no, in terms of then, you've been an entrepreneur / business owner, co-founder for the last 20 years at Trillium Partners. What's the biggest lesson you've learned, and what can you share with us? What can you share with us? Yeah.
Well, I've been involved in one or two other things as well down that period, but I think when I left Canary Wharf to set up Trillium Partners 20 years ago, I made a pact with myself that when things went wrong, I would come home and have a glass of wine and greet the new day, the following day, and get on with it, not be set back. And I think you have to have that mindset. If something doesn't go right in the business, then that was that day. And obviously the corollary of that being to grip very tightly to things that are going well and to try to, as we've just been discussing, to repeat and replicate. But I think I've learned, therefore, not to cry over spilled milk. I've learned the great rewards that can come from working with a close-knit team over a long period of time, because we tended to have, notwithstanding that we get a lot of attention from competitors for some of our younger staff, we do have quite good longevity in the group. And I think I've learned the value of that. To this, your point about it's 10 times easier to get someone to buy. Well, there's probably a quote somewhere, if I looked for it, which should explain how much more effective a business is if people have been there for a long time and aren't just coming and going. You have to have a culture in the business, and you have to keep it alive. And that's not least helped by people who are around for a while. So I've learned the importance of teamwork with people over a long period of time. And I think I've finally learned, maybe this is part of the first point, but, nothing's ever personal. When things go right or wrong, it's not personal to you. It's just the way it happens. And, everything in business is driven by business, and you should acknowledge that. And when it goes right for you, great. But things are going to go wrong. Those would be the three things I throw out as my starters on that subject.
I absolutely love the last one, and I couldn't agree with it more. It's no one's trying to actually come out to get you, or even if it feels like it at times or whatever. Like everyone's self-incentivized, they're interested in themselves, and there's nothing personal about it. So I think that's a really interesting take and lesson there. Stephen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. It's been an insightful conversation, really, really interesting. I'd like to end every single podcast with the same question. And that is, if you had a magic wand you could wave to solve one business problem, what would that be?
Oh, I think the biggest single issue is just time. The things I've been talking about. If you go to a doctor or any other common experience with a professional, you want to be going to have a conversation where that individual has been as well researched, knows what they're doing, and has indeed put a lot of time into their profession. It's no different with us. The more time I can have to prepare for my interactions with clients, the time I spend with them, it's just time. Time's the thing that I'm always short of. So my magic wand would probably make the day, 35 hours long. I'd be exhausted in a week, but that would be what I would do.
Love it, Stephen. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing your time today. For all those out there that might want to reach out to you and find you, where would they go? How would they find you?
We're on trilliumpartners.co.uk. That's TRILLRUM for mother, partners.co.uk. I'm personally on LinkedIn, Stephen Routledge, and people contact me all the time. So happy to respond to anyone who would like to have a further conversation. Me up and read about the company on the website, and hit me up on LinkedIn, and we can take it from there.
Fantastic. Well, Stephen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Saeed. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.